Here we are today. We're going to be doing a partial mash brew day. I wanted to show everybody what it was involved with brewing a partial mash beer. So behind me I've got the equipment and actually what goes into the partial mash. Partial mash, what makes it different is that it has a considerable more amount of grain. This particular beer is going to be an Arrogant Bastard clone, and this is how much grain will go into that beer, and it's going to be a 6-gallon batch. We're looking at it's right at 10 pounds of grain. As you see, the grain here is not crushed. We're going to take you into the crusher here in a minute to crush the grain, but first I wanted to go through the ingredients. So we have 10 pounds of grain, which is comprised of mostly two-row barley from England called Maris Otter, and then several specialty grains. The other part of this beer is a big beer. It's pretty much a barley wine, and with that said, you know, with a partial mash you couldn't get the entire gravity from just grain, so we're going to be doing we add some Golden Light liquid malt extract to it to bring up the gravity to make up the difference after the boil. So anyway, what you see here, we've got yeast of several different flavors. Today we're going to be using a smack pack like this, but if you were doing this kit and you did a dry yeast, you would use US-05 or Nottingham. Either one of those yeasts would work for this particular kit. And then the hops we're going to be using is actually Chinook, but the hops look similar to this. And then during the boil we'll actually add some yeast energizer right towards the end, so I just wanted to show the yeast energizer. We're also going to be using Irish moss. Most of your extract kits do not have Irish moss in them, and in this partial mash kit we will actually use Irish moss, and I'll explain what that is when it comes around to it. We also use gypsum in this beer. This beer is pretty hoppy, and to accentuate the hop character in this beer, we add some gypsum to it. And then we also have a grain bag. Some of you might be familiar with the grain bag if you've made an extract kit before. What's different about this grain bag than most is it's very long, and it will hold a large amount of grain. This grain bag will actually pretty easily hold that 10 pounds of grain. This essentially becomes a mash tun for the process. So then moving on, we also have our equipment. You'll see here the equipment required for this beer. You'll need a bucket with an airlock on it. That's going to be our primary fermenter. And then during the during the sparge process, we'll actually use a colander. This colander we got very cheap at the dollar store. You can pick them up pretty much anywhere like that. You basically take that colander, throw it on the bucket during our sparge process, which we'll get into later. Then behind that you'll see our secondary fermenter. In this case we're using a better bottle. That's where the beer will go after it's sat in the primary for 7 to 10 days until the beer is done fermenting. You'll also notice there's a hydrometer, which looks like this, which we'll use later on to check the specific gravity of the beer. You'll need that. You'll need one of these, which is a hydrometer test jar. That's what you actually take the reading in. Then you'll need some sanitizer, which is what this is. This is Star San. And then you also want to get yourself a good kitchen scale, as well as a cleaner, which the cleaner that I prefer is PBW. And then also, lastly, some cheap vodka. The cheaper the better. This goes into the airlock. I use that instead of sanitizer just because I prefer to have vodka in my beer than sanitizer. So we're now over at our grain mill here at the shop. I crush everything here. I use everything that I crush. So one thing that I want to say is that the crush is hugely important in partial mash brewing, as it is in all grain brewing. You want to make sure you have the right percentage of hulls to flour in your grist, which is your grain once it's crushed. And like I said, because we use what we crush here, I ensure our customers that you'll get the proper crush if you use our grain mill. Anyhow, what we're going to do here is actually go through the crushing process, and basically all you do is you take your grain, which is your grain bill for the beer, and add that to your crusher, your mill. One thing that I want to make sure people realize too is that when you crush the grain, you're not actually making flour out of it. You know, you're just simply making sure that the inside of the grain's exposed so that it can be exposed to water during the brewing process. So basically the way this works is you just hand crank this mill, and that's all there is to it. So one important thing here is that when you're crushing your grain, you want to make sure that you're cranking at a relatively slow speed. You don't want to buzz right through the grain. A lot of people will throw a drill onto their mill, and really when you put a drill on and you're cranking it really fast, you won't get a proper crush. So it's important to keep it at a pretty slow speed, and in order to get a good crush. So we're back here in the brewery. I've got the crushed grain here in our brown bag. Whenever you buy any grain from us in kits, typically I have it ready in a brown sack like this. So basically one of the things that I wanted to mention is that you'll also need a large stock pot. Today we're going to be doing a full boil. So what that means is we're going to be boiling the full volume. We start with a slightly higher volume than what we need. So today we're brewing 6 gallons, so we're actually going to start with 7.5 gallons for our boil. So what that means is that if you were doing this at home, most people don't have a large enough burner to accommodate for a full boil. So you would use roughly 3.5 gallons. You start with like a 4-gallon stock pot, and boil 3 gallons or 3.5 gallons down to 2.5 gallons, and then at the end you actually add cold water to it to cool it. And what that does is it allows you to not have a chiller, and it allows you to have a smaller pot. In the instance here at the shop, I have a really nice brew on premise system, and I've got a large enough kettle, so that's part of the reason why we're doing a full boil here. You don't need to have this fancy system to do this beer. You don't. You know, you can start with a large stock pot, a turkey fryer, and still do a full boil. You just have to have the addition of copper coil to cool the wort down to temperature quickly. So anyway, our water is to temperature. We're about to temperature right now, so we're going to get ready and actually start our mashing and our dough-in process. So now we're pretty much ready to get this thing doughed in, which basically all doughing in means is adding the grain to your water. So here we go. I filled the bucket up to 3.75 gallons, and I am now mashing in. What I'm going to do here is is very gently pull the bag of grain up and down to get the hot water exposed to the grain, and then what I'll do is actually stir the grain inside the grain bag to get all of the grain exposed to the water. And this can kind of be a daunting task on batches like this, but basically you just run your mash paddle up and down inside the bag to expose that to the water, and then after we get all the grain exposed to water inside that steeping bag, then we'll leave this to mash for 90 minutes. Okay, so we're back, and the mash has been done, completed in the bucket, and we're getting ready to sparge. So the way the sparge process works, first we want to dunk the grain sack in the mash water first for about 5 minutes, and then after we're done dunking, then what we're going to do is take the grain bag out and put it into this other bucket and start the sparge process. So basically it goes like this for the dunking procedure, and all this does is just helps get all the sugars out of the grain, and this is just an extra step that I do for my partial mash. As you can see, we've extracted quite a bit of color out of that, and hopefully we've got some sugars in there, but I don't have a doubt at all we do. So one thing is that with the mash, we've got 4 gallons of wort collected into our bucket. Our goal is to have 9 gallons total volume into our kettle, and the reason why it's so much is because in our kettle here that we use, it has a dead space of 1 gallon. So we've got to we come out at 6 gallons. To have 6 gallons finished beer, or wort I should say, we have 7 gallons of wort in the kettle at the end of our boil. So in order to do that, we have to collect at least 9 gallons of wort in the kettle before we boil. So the way the sparge works is, like I say, I'll dump this wort into the kettle, and what we'll do is we'll take the colander and put it over top of the bucket, and here's the colander, and it's just a regular run-of-the-mill colander that you find at one of your dollar stores or somewhere like that. And we take our grain sack and we transfer it back into the bucket, and this is where it kind of gets a little tricky. But the idea here is it's really simple. With our system here at the shop, this makes it really simple to do a partial mash beer. But at home, what you would do is take your kettle and you just simply pour really slowly. Where you take a pitcher like this, and you'd fill it up with your water like so, and you'd pour it very, very, very slowly over top of the grain. And what that's doing is it's going to rinse the sugars out of the grain. And you want this process to take about 45 minutes. So you want it to be very, very slow. Alright, so we're back here. We finished the sparge. We sparged to a little over 9 gallons. We're actually collecting, we wanted to collect 9, we collected a little over 9 like I said, and we added a teaspoon of gypsum to our kettle. And the reason why we did that is to increase the hop utilization, and it helps accentuate the bitterness of the beer. And in this case, we're making a barley wine, so we want it bitter. and our water, it works best to use a teaspoon. Your water, it might not be the same, so you might want to send it out to Word Labs or someplace like that to have it tested first before you do add a teaspoon of gypsum. But for most people, especially in our region, a teaspoon of gypsum works well.